Chapter 23. Captivity Day 25. Carly sat cross-legged on the bed, her black tail swaying lazily behind her. Her twin tails slid under the bed and took hold of a pair of ribbons connected to the mystrium strip, which had been separated from the circular rune. "Lower field," Shugok said after tapping his finger against it. Carly isolated the sound of the sliding block as she pulled it back into place, reactivating the knack suppression barrier. She struggled to hide her discomfort as her expanded psyche collapsed into itself, and her connection to the nautiloids was severed. Hopefully, it wouldn't have a significant effect on the Cletharian's orderly withdrawal from Midnight Fellowship space. "It was agreed nobody's supposed to enter without my express permission. That was before your night out," Shugok said as he stepped across the circle of runes. Carly's twin tails slid onto the bed while he was looking around in confusion. "I appreciate you allowing me to have a guest for the evening," Carly said, "but I fail to see how that entitles you to violate a good faith agreement." "The conditions of her departure were peculiar," Shugok said while wandering around the room, casually looking through her things. "She and Ujaran were already gone when I woke up," Carly said. "I assumed they left together. What was strange about her departure?" "Your guest left alone, without anyone lowering the field," he said. "She just walked right through it. I don't suppose you'd know anything about that. The field is in working order, and knacks are still disabled." He picked up her fox mask, and looked to be examining it for hidden compartments or devices. "That ring doesn't inhibit racial abilities. I know it affects normal knacks, but what about ones classified as gifts or active toggles?" Carly asked. "With a few minor exceptions, toggles drop. Gifts? I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think so. That leaves racial abilities," Shugok sounded worried, "which would be problematic. I'm concerned at how banning Ujaran from visiting you would affect your mental state. He seems to be a positive influence on you. Lilac is hoping to avert a predicted calamity if we are more flexible in our dealings with you." "Wait," Carly said in distress. "Why would you ban contact with Ujaran?" "He's a Pharisine," Shugok shrugged. "They have a racial property that can interfere with electronics, colloquially referred to as Jinx device." "So, you're blaming him?" Carly gaped. "He always requests it to be turned off, and you said she left alone without the field being deactivated. Maybe she just got lucky. Jax turned it off with cyberpathy, maybe that messed it up. It could have been dumb luck. I'll have a team sent later in the week to run a diagnostic check on the field emitter, or maybe Ujaran forgot to turn it back on, like you did." Shugok walked over and raised his arm as confirmation. I guess I did. Did they have any soul stones or anything like that?" "What would a Herisham want with soul stones?" Carly asked. "Herisham," Shugok said in surprise. "So, they're not Lampharian." "I wish," Carly sighed. "Well, that explains it," Shugok said as he stepped out of the ring and reactivated the field. "Sorry for wasting your time, Lady Darkseid. If you ever have them back, tell her not to jinx the field." "They can do that," Carly stammered. "Just Pharisine and Herisham," Shugok said as he started for the exit. Carly sighed with relief. She waited until he was gone before pulling on a different ribbon with her black tail to deactivate the suppression barrier. Carly closed her eyes and held her breath as she felt her knacks reawakening within her. Her right tail reconnected swiftly to the weaver resting between the Horsehawk and Mygor systems. The rhythm of her song flowed out through it, guiding home the Cletharian citadel that had devastated the Loctarian species. She could feel the movements of the collective stirring the fur on her tail as her black tail returned to its eternal task of trying to reconnect with the baby nautiloid she'd left behind in the Dewstar Nebula. It always seemed just out of her reach regardless of how hard she strained. Her left tail hadn't found a solid connection yet, although she knew there was a nautiloid near Kelfner, but that weaver seemed preoccupied. She reached out further and further looking for a familiar mind, hoping to find Samari. Syntholo's knack rendered his mind too slippery to connect to. Cyanide's mental defenses were reflexive and nearly impenetrable. Far beyond the Erosha system, there was a familiar mind somewhere between Carvel and Glazum, but there had to be a mistake. The Karzan's effort to take Carmel should have started 4 days ago. Why would she be all the way up here? The cord connecting Kali and TRO was slender and frail. It was her sister self that had interacted with the pygmy Karzan, and they hadn't forged an emotional bond. The gratitude the woman felt toward Lady Darkseid was the strongest link between them. Trying to reach her would be tricky. Kali's best bet would be to check periodically, hoping to catch her when the young woman's mind was quieter. Her dreaming thoughts were far too chaotic. There was one more presence out there, but it was too weak to even identify. Tio. She'd been plagued by strange dreams all night. When she woke, her fur was damp and smelled pungent. She just felt weird. Apparently, she wasn't the only one who thought so. A towel had been folded up at the foot of her bunk, with a bottle of fur and body rinse, and a note from Beta instructing her to report to the medical bay after she gets cleaned up. TRO was mortified. The vibration of the engine was wrong. They'd dropped out of jump space. She'd paid extra to not be delayed by the jump space disruptor field. She'd have to find out what was going on. She was uncomfortable and grumpy as she rolled off the top bunk. Her tail spun behind her as her feet landed firmly on the floor. She glared at the foot of the bed. Was she sick? Had she caught something? She'd been warned the Parshai liked playing tricks on people. That was probably it. Dizzy had a private room. Beta slept in the medical bay. She was still sleeping in the 4-bed barracks room. There were 2 other rooms, each of which bunked 2. Audie and Maury shared one of them. The other was reserved for passengers. The reason they wouldn't just let her use it seemed unfair. They insisted she sleep near a bathroom. She may be young, but that was just insulting. She started feeling better after getting cleaned up, but the smell wasn't completely gone. It was very faint. Hopefully nobody would notice. The room was still empty when she returned from the shower. There was a loud whirring from the air filtration system. They must have turned it up. That didn't help her mood any. Was it really that bad? She turned right after leaving the room and paused at the door to the long hallway to the engineering area. "Where do you think you're going?" Beta yelled from behind her. "What am I doing?" TRO scolded herself as she turned around to head toward the medical bay. "You'd think I fell from a branch. Where's my head today?" "In," Beta commanded. "Don't make me get a ladder so I can climb up there and slap some sense into you." Beta followed her into the room and directed her to undress and lie down on the examination table. "This is a preliminary examination," Beta said as she jumped up and stood on the table next to TRO. "This may not be my specialty, but with 3 Karzan women on board, it's not the first time I've had to perform an exam of this sort, and no, you can't refuse. Roll onto your back, with your knees up." "What kind of examination?" TRO said, panic-stricken. "Gynecological. What? I keep myself clean." "It has nothing to do with cleanliness," Beta sighed. "If you'll just roll over and calm down, this won't take long." TRO rolled over and looked in horror at the cotton swab being held aloft by the black-furred woman. Maybe it was just her nervousness, or the tiny hand grasping it, or where she expected it to be put, but in TRO's eyes it looked like a ramrod made to shove the powder into an old-fashioned cannon. "Not much swelling yet," Beta said. "I don't know how dark you are normally, but it's a little red compared to Roan. I just need to get a fluid sample to make sure it's not just." As the swab began to lower between her legs, TRO panicked, leaped off the table, flung the door open, and ran down the hallway. If something happens, it's on you, Beta called after her. 2 hallways later she burst into the engine room. Mary spun around in her chair. Have you been seen by Beta yet? She saw me, Tiro said nervously. Is it yeast, or beast? Maury asked. What? Tiro blinked. She saw you. Maury shook her head. What did you do? Open the door, yell look at me, and run off? No, Tiro insisted. She came after me with this huge swab. It's your life, Maury grumbled. If there are any unexpected surprises, that's on you. Go back to her for some cream just in case it's only a yeast infection. When the guy that smells like week-old sashimi says you stink, there's a problem. You don't have to be cruel, Tiro complained. You're paying us to shove you through a Starlink, not to be kind. That costs extra. If you have a problem, take it up with the captain. Wodao is on duty right now, so good luck with that. I thought she liked me, Tiro whimpered. Tro, nobody likes anyone when they're being moody. The ship's not that big. We'd all kill each other if we didn't have the sense to stay clear of each other when we're having a bad day. Well, except for Dizzy. They haven't had a good day since. Well, never mind that. It's not my story to tell. Why did we drop out of jump space? Tio asked. Checking for messages and adjusting our course. We are stopping off at Glasm. I don't know all the details. I'll be staying on the ship. You won't. I need to get back home. I paid extra to get there faster. Why do I have to? Beta's concerned about your health. Whether or not you listen to the ship's doctor, we'll be stopping there. If you have a problem with that, talk to Audie. Fine. Where's Audie? Tro grumbled. Upstairs on the flight deck with Desiree, Maury said. Oh. Tro pouted. I'll try later. I don't think Dizzy likes me. I won't argue with that, Maury growled. You bring up Delaric almost every time you open your mouth, but all you want to know about is his last hours with us. We traveled with him for years. Desiree was with him longer than any of us. Have you ever considered asking about the good times? The reason I do impressions is because it reminds everyone of when he was with us. You keep reminding everyone of the hole he left behind. Think about it. I don't mean to. Tro started. I said think, not speak, Maury scolded. Tro wandered to the galley to get something to eat and brood for a while. The reptilian dock worker, Salju, walked briskly into the room. The feathered tip of his tail dragging behind him. He had dull brown scales and brilliant blue feathers. He walked to the cupboard and took out a fat plate with a half-inch lip, retrieved a silicon ice mold from the freezer, and a long-neck bottle from the refrigerator. Hey, Tro said quietly. He silently walked past her and left without a word. Tro felt the vibration through the hull change as the ship re-entered jump space. Tro sighed. She just wanted to get to know the other people on the ship. Had she really alienated herself from everyone in so little time? What was she doing wrong? Bobtail was the only person she felt she could talk to. He always seemed eager to see her. He was older and knew the crew. Maybe he could help her understand what she was doing wrong. Tiro walked out of the galley and leaned on the ledge above the stairs leading to the captain's briefing room. A little further down the main hallway, at the bottom of the curved staircase leading to the flight deck, Audie, Salju, and Desiree were having a discussion. Dizzy actually looked excited. Tiro looked down over the stairwell, trying to listen in without being obvious. My mother did, but my father didn't like it. They used to argue for hours, Audie shrugged. I was never allowed to participate or even talk about it. My dad had a fit whenever he found out I watched. I thought it was a normal part of growing up in a mixed-faith family, but I eventually had to accept the truth. Her father is an intolerant Kustaru, Desiree said. The reptile's chest heaved as he laughed. My mother gave me one of her sacred shards when I was a teen, but I just used it as a worry stone. I still have it, if that helps. I've conducted the Silshi ceremony before, but I don't know the Song of Gaia or the Divine Eye, and it's illegal to possess. Desiree opened her door, part way, but at an angle away from Tiaroa's line of sight. Is that? Salju stammered. How did you? I brought it with me. When I left the old world, Desiree was grinning. The bud will be ready by the time we reach Glazum tonight. I was never devout, but we can muddle our way through the ritual if you two are serious about this. I'll bring the cactus sap. Audie has the rock, and you've got the rest. We have 3 of the 4 species from our ancestral homeworld on board, Audie said excitedly. Let's do it. As it always was, Salju said, Silshi, E2, Hieratic, and a place left open for the 4th. Not quite, Audie said with a smile. The Hieratic are gone. Only hybrids, like me, remain, but Dizzy isn't an E2. The reptilian said something in a language Tro didn't know. Dizzy nodded slowly, and repeated a sound made by the Silshi, Dujari. Salju gaped. I thought the 4th was just a legend. I am honored you have revealed this to me. This isn't Gelad, Audie scoffed. Nobody is going to try and kill her just for existing. You saw the look on his face. Dizzy snickered. His people didn't do that. Our ability to mimic the appearance of Terrans is much more precise. We Silshi saw the 4th as a gift sent to give comfort to the parent who lost a child, he said, unlike the 2 Terran species who blame them for the loss. Karzan cubs die all the time, Tro interjected. Deaths like that are just part of life. I saw you over there. I didn't think you were actually listening. Dizzy smirked. Your people have litters. Loss is harder to bear when only a single child is born, Salju said. Dizzy was watching Tro with a look on her face that seemed to dare her to say something stupid. Are the 4th like those birds that put their eggs in another bird's nest? Tro asked nervously. Something like that, Dizzy smiled faintly. We don't produce enough nutrients to support another life. We can sense when a child isn't going to survive, and replace it with one of our own on the night of its death. Our substitute will take on the precise appearance of the lost child in just under 15 minutes. The corpse is removed once the process is complete. Tro thought it sounded pretty wild and didn't understand why the Terrans had such a problem with it. Her eyes darted back and forth as she decided whether or not to ask. I was born on Gelad, Dizzy said to no one in particular. Dujari can always tell our own. Hundreds of children were murdered by parents who had convinced themselves their child was one of the 4th. Not a single one was Dujari. I don't think we ever reached 1% of the population, but to hear them talk, we were hiding under every stone. Is this why we are stopping at Glazum? Tio asked. What? No, Desiree scoffed. We have to be in normal space to conduct the ceremony. Planetside is safer if we are going to split a cactus bud, Audie said, but that's not why we are going there. Ishmael and Dizzy have side jobs to take care of there. We'll pick him up on the way back. We've decided not to bring him with us into Cletherian space. Dizzy's thing will only take a couple hours. She'll be done before you are. I feel fine, Tro insisted. I don't need to be checked out. We sleep in the same room, Salju said. There is nothing healthy about that smell. The crew has a wager going, Beitar said from directly across the hallway, standing in the doorway to the medical bay. You either have a massive infection, or you're going into heat. You smell pretty ripe, so I'm guessing it'll be your first. There are 3 pools going. Heat or yeast, how many days until you start, and whether or not you make it to the link with your virginity intact. Tro blinked in disbelief. Why did you tell her that? Audie snapped. More important question, Dizzy snickered. Why didn't anyone tell me? I know I'm new, Salju said, but can I get in on this? Tiaroa's ear twitched at the sound of a chair moving downstairs. No, Audie scoffed. I keep the books for any wagers among the crew. Off-book wagers are against the rules. Beta, you know that. Seriously though, Baron Delaric would never have allowed you to bet on someone's virginity, and neither will I. Still pretending to be the arbiter of my father's volition. Wodow growled as she walked up the last few stairs onto the main deck. You didn't even know him for a full year, Audie. Stop presuming to speak on his behalf. Sorry, Captain, Beta said. I was trying to goad Frosty into seeing a specialist. I didn't mean to. I need to get back to work, Salju said, then rushed off. Tiaro looked around at the four women. The tension in the air was palpable. You are not dismissed, Wodow growled at Beta as she started backing into the med bay. Let her go, Desiree urged. She took things too far, again. You can't change a Parshai's nature, and you know we have no chance to catch her if she runs. Wodow smirked. Just stay out of my sight. Yes, Captain, Beta said, then mouthed the words thank you to Dizzy. Beta was back at her station with the door closed a moment later. Don't be too harsh on Audie for having an idealized view of your father, Dizzy soothed. I'll tell her about your 7th-year celebration later, so this doesn't happen again. I'm going to see if Maury is willing to take over bridge duty until Roan's shift starts. I'm exhausted. Audie lowered her head. Not sleeping well? Desiree asked. Better than you, Wodow sighed as she started down the hallway. What did she mean by that? Tio asked softly. Dizzy hasn't slept more than a half hour at a time since the Battle of Titan, Audie said flatly. Dizzy, Audie, and Tio waited quietly until Wodow had left the main deck. Idiot, Dizzy said while cuffing the back of Audie's head. Hey, watch the ears, Audie yelped. On the Baron's old ship, they had a pool running for when Wodow was going to finally get hers. Karzan women lose their minds on their first heat, screeching and clawing at the walls until they get what they're after. The rule was nobody could interfere with her when she has her first heat, or touch her before she starts. They started the pool when she turned 6, and it ran for a little over a year. He let them wager on when and where, but not who with. Just as well, considering how it all turned out. Tio decided to keep her mouth closed, and just listen. She looked like she wanted to tear my throat out, Audie asked. What happened? The guys on the crew could smell when it was getting close. They weren't allowed to change their bets, but they could keep close. Just not too close. If the ship ever came under attack while she was in the galley on a meal break, we would have lost the ship. We weren't fully crewed at the time, only around 220, give or take. Around 50 weren't felinodes. There were around 30 female Karzan at the time. That leaves what? Around 150 males, Audie interjected. It gets worse, Dizzy said as she smiled at the wide-eyed, slack-jawed expression on Tiaroa's face. That's lot of guys, Audie said. The fighter bay crew was around 70, including pilots. The galley had seating for 40. Cargo hold maxed out at 30, when Punch and Judy weren't on duty. Who? Tio asked. A pair of Kitalma Martian, Dizzy chuckled. Massive species. They could play catch with a ship the size of yours. I miss them, Audie said sadly. Me, too, Dizzy smiled warmly, then frowned. Sorry, go ahead, Audie said. Just running the numbers. Delaric shut that down a few days before we got into a nasty skirmish. A few days later, he told me he'd been tipped off by someone called Phantom Hound. We'd lost around a dozen heavy strike fighters and taken some damage, so we headed to the Nebula Pocket in the Dinarira system for replacements and repairs. Morale wasn't great, but Wodow's 7th birthday was just a few days away, so we used it as an excuse to clear out the main cargo bay and have a party. Let everyone blow off some steam.
No, Audie said.
Desiree nodded slowly. Yeah, the entire crew all in one, massive, well-lit, room without a single crate to hide behind. So she goes into heat, makes a racket, picks a guy, and has sex in front of the entire crew. That must have been embarrassing after she calmed down, Audie said.
Dizzy turned to face Tiero.
The sisters each have an insertable device that pulsates at the right speed to trick their bodies out of it whenever they do go into heat, so she's never seen it.
I have.
The older they get, the milder it gets.
Frost Tail,
have you ever seen one of your kind during their first heat? Our families arrange pairing and lock us in a special private room together until it's over. I've heard stories of girls whose families weren't prepared for it, but I've never actually seen it.
My arranged pairing is with me Arco Firetail. I'm really looking forward to it.
I'm really late. I'm a few months away from being 8. My family is starting to worry I might be infertile. If I am, I'm a little worried it might be my fault.
How could it be your fault?
Audie scoffed.
How about I finish the story of Wodow's first heat, before discussing Frosty's fertility?
Dizzy snickered.
The other 2 women urged her to continue.
This was years before either Roan or Maury joined us. Roan had gone through hers before she joined us. Having learned what not to do, we were much more careful when Maury's time came.
Maury told me you helped them through it, Audie said.
I bought them a device to ease them through it and kept them company. I'm not sure that's really helping them through it.
Dizzy shrugged. But let's get back to Wodow, Dizzy grumbled.
That's not what she said, Audie giggled, but go ahead.
Dizzy glared at Audie before continuing. So there's Wodow, all dressed for a party in her honor. She showed up a little while after the festivities started. Most everyone there was buzzing nicely. Judging by the number of scuffles, not many were inebriated yet. When she walked in, even I could smell it. I thought she was getting sick until I saw how our male Karzan crewmates were reacting. The same scent that had gagged me was like a hook lodged deep in their sinus cavities. Wherever she went, their noses followed. She was close, and they all knew it. They all knew the score. They could drool all they wanted, but keep your hands off that honeypot. I could see her trying to fight it, but it's not an urge, or even a want. First heat is an irresistible, insatiable, biological drive. Her jaw was trembling for a few minutes before she realized what was happening. I'll never forget the look in her eyes. She was terrified, feeling her self-control being torn away from her like that. She sprinted, just a few feet toward the door, then froze. Her face contorted, her mouth opened, and this noise came out. There wasn't a shred of intelligence left in her eyes. Wodow was like a wild animal. From that point onward, I don't think she took a single step forward. She got down on all fours, with her tail up in the air. She backed up into any guy that got close, and kept backing into them till they pulled it out for her to back herself right onto. Her pretty new dress was in shreds before long.
Please, tell me you're exaggerating, Audie gasped.
I wish I was, Dizzy scowled.
Maury's first heat only lasted an hour or 2.
Wodow was in that state for over a day. I tried to convince Beta to sedate her. She'd been told it just had to run its course and to try to keep her hydrated, so we did. When she finally came back to her senses, she'd fucked every male Karzan on the ship, including a couple pygmies.
Every male Karzan?
Audie asked in shock.
We ended up having to open the cargo bay to the vacuum of space to get rid of the smell, Dizzy shuddered.
That's not what I was asking, Audie said.
The door to the medical bay opened abruptly.
We don't talk about that, Beta said to Audie with daggers in her eyes.
You said Baron Delaric was like a father to her, Tiro said hesitantly. Why didn't he stop it? Well, Desiree began. Dizzy, Beta snarled. Not another word. I think we should tell Frosty about the aftermath, Dizzy said aggressively. She needs to understand. Fine, Beta growled. I'll do it. Wodao didn't snap out of it until she'd gotten pregnant. She didn't want to keep it. Her father opposed her having an abortion, so she came to me. I hadn't done anything like that before, but she begged me until I agreed. I made a mistake. My hand slipped, rupturing her uterus. She almost died, and now she can't have children. Are you happy now? TRO, Dizzy said compassionately. Please let them take you to get checked out. If you do go into heat, you'll tear this ship apart trying to get to Bobtail. If you end up pregnant, Beta won't lift a finger to help you. Not after what happened with Wodao. Topic change, Audie said loudly. Why do you think you may be infertile, and how would that be your fault? Beta stuttered TRO. Most of my friends have had theirs, and a bunch of them had sex with me Arco sometime after that. I wanted him to be with me, so I decided to have sex with him too, before my first heat. He put it in me and everything, but he said it didn't feel right. He said it didn't feel like I really wanted it, but I swear I did. I'm worried I messed up, and maybe I can't go into heat now. I really needed that, Beta burst out laughing. TRO began to tear up. Oh wait, were you serious? The Pa Shy asked. The part of your brain that allows you to feel carnal lust isn't active until your first heat. Of course, there was a difference. You'll understand after you've had yours. Why do people keep saying that? TRO stomped her feet. Because it's true, Beta scoffed. Some things just have to be experienced, Dizzy shrugged. Hang on, you left out the most important part. Who won the pot? Audie asked. Was it anyone I met? All I remember is it was sent to their next of kin. I don't remember their name, Beta said thoughtfully. They were long dead by the time you came along. Do you remember, Dizzy? They were assigned to your squadron. The Mongunny brawler with a bare spot under his left eye. Wow, Desiree laughed. I forgot about him. Punch flipped over his fighter one day because he wouldn't shut up. While the Dujari and Pa Shy continued to reminisce over lost comrades, Audie walked over to encourage TRO to let them bring her to see a specialist, but she remained adamant in her refusal. Samari. The Acrididae dynasty had collapsed completely during the Loctarian genocide. Even without the direction of a queen, their numerical superiority had proven insurmountable. Had the Fellowship factions united, they could have stood their ground, but their military losses would have been shared instead of consolidated. The remaining three factions, the Triad Confederacy, Parliamentary Flock, and Daenerok Nation, remained with 17 star systems divided among them. The 5 systems devastated by Cletheria had left a power vacuum just waiting to be filled. Cletheria hadn't seized control of a single star system during any epoch, but that was under the reign of the old queen. Once Samari reclaimed Kayla's queen's mark, she hoped to change that. Hopefully, her sister self, Kali, wouldn't object. Their next confrontation with the false queen was inevitable. If they didn't succeed this time, they're unlikely to have another chance. It's a bit like the Midnight Fellowship. If they all stood together, they could have withstood Cletheria. Without unification, they only endured by sacrificing part of the whole on the altar of Cletheria's vengeance. The false queen would not withdraw once her rage was abated. She wasn't angry, just hungry. The date of the Ulavecule presentation ceremony had been set well in advance. The Black Wings of Glory had belonged to the Pharisine warlord Zorik, so they were to be returned to the reptilian faction of the Fellowship. The wings once held by Acrididae would be granted to the next warlord of the core ward region of the Fellowship. Cyanide had given Prask time away from his duties. Samari would be posing as her defender during the ceremony for the sake of convenience. Louis's training was coming along nicely, but due to his tendency to lash out when frightened, he had to be left behind on the shuttle. Samari had convinced him he was guarding the shuttle so he'd feel like he was performing an important task. He liked being useful to her, and had quickly become fiercely loyal and protective. The side door of the shuttle had been left open for Louis's comfort. He wouldn't wander too far. Cyan and Sam stood at the top of a stairway at the edge of a landing pad in a remote jungle location on the planet Ithran, the capital of the Rimward faction of the Fellowship, the Triad Confederacy. They could see and hear movement in the thick brush, but whoever or whatever was out there was hard to discern. Sam reached over and grasped Cyan's hand. She felt reassured by the tingling warmth of her companion's soul touch. As long as they were in contact, they would be able to feel each other's thoughts without using telepathic abilities. Akia had taught the original Samari this technique long ago. It was commonly used by Lamentics and their defenders. Nervous? Cyan thought. Is this normal? Sam thought back. I feel like we are standing at the heart of an ambush. That's the point, Cyan thought while smiling deviously. How would you maintain the upper hand while dealing with me? Grow a tail, and paint stripes all over my body, Sam thought while stifling a giggle. That could work, Cyan sighed wistfully. Sam was startled by the sound of Cyan's voice. She hadn't expected her to speak aloud. The forlorn sorrow in her voice paled in comparison to the intense longing she could feel flowing through the woman's soul. I thought you said Lamentics don't feel intense emotions, Sam thought. It builds slowly, Cyanide thought. I must obey the High Court, and wait 35 more days. Given the choice, I'd extinguish their star and get her myself. I have the desire but not the means. The calmness of Cyan's thoughts and determination within the woman's soul was terrifying. Samari smiled. Kivaza hadn't merely found an equal in Cyanide, but a kindred soul that not even Kayla could have equaled. They're coming, Cyan said aloud as the sound of a hover car flowed down a road cutting through the jungle. As the car pulled up, a Pharisine woman wearing, rune-encrusted, grey robes hurried to the bottom of the stairs and bowed low before them. Lady Cyanide Goran Haysoru Killen Orwell Ulmerton, of the Order of the Unperfected, the woman said in a steady, formal tone, many apologies for the delay. There was a last-minute assignment change. 7th seat of the War Council, Tejmare to the Cletherian Queen, disciple of Ayesha, executioner of the High Court, and the will of Tsarina Ulmerton, Supreme Inspector of Stripes. Any titles I'm missing? Sam thought bemusedly. The reptilian woman's head tilted slightly as she looked at Samari. Careful, check your emotions, Cyan thought through soul touch. That thought was far too enthusiastic. She heard you. Sam bit her lower lip and blushed. You're welcome to drop the formalities once you indulge me, Cyan said to the Pharisine. You are a member of the Order, aren't you? The woman looked up. Lady Cyanide, lower your hood, Cyanide commanded. Sam could see the woman physically struggling against Cyanide's will. That was no simple instruction or request. Cyan had used a psionic power to compel the woman. A silent direction was passed to Samari through soul touch. Sam muttered quietly and rolled her free hand in a circle as she created a spherical barrier of force around the car. Everyone has enemies, take care not to make yourself mine. Cyan's voice was no louder, but seemed to echo throughout their surroundings. The car doors thumped against Sam's invisible barrier as the soldiers tried to get out. She did well. Her will is stronger than I expected, Cyan smiled as the woman pulled back her hood. This is a teaching moment. Sam, do you see those 2 stripes of red scales from the top of her head to the end of her nose? Pharisine can camouflage their scales to suit their surroundings. The more often they do it, the more they turn red. Her fingers are mostly red too. With that much red, she's a criminal, an assassin, or a spy from the Order. Which one is it, Pharisine? I'm with the Order, the woman confessed. Truth, Cyan said. You overheard some of my defender's private thoughts. I have no choice in the matter. I'm going to have to either redact those thoughts or rip them out of your skull. The choice is yours. You can't, the woman insisted. My husband is named Ujaran. He's one of Lady Darkseid's caretakers on Erosha. It's vital that I talk to you. Sam, drop the field, Cyan said. We'll be accompanying her to the ceremony with her memories intact, and she'll be telling us all she can, won't you? Yes, Lady Cyanide, the Pharisine said with a long shuddering sigh. What's your name? Samari asked. My name is Azuri, the woman said while holding out her trembling hand. Samari shook her hand firmly. The soldiers in the car had been sent to make sure everyone made it safely to the site of the actual ceremony. The public ceremony will be held later, with a replica of the wings, while the real set were on their way to their new owner. The back of the car, where the 3 women were seated, was soundproofed so they could talk in private. Despite the rocky start, the conversation went well. The term husband wasn't entirely accurate, but it didn't much matter. Samari wasn't interested in a crash course in Pharisine culture. Azuri linked her tablet to a display screen in the back of the car and reviewed the correspondence between her and Ujaran with Cyanide during the ride. Samari struggled to feign disinterest, while periodically touching Cyan to securely pass thoughts and impressions to her. Even after some messages sent by Kali through Ujaran's tablet were pointed out, Sam continued to avoid revealing too much about herself. Samari was caught off guard by the references to Jack's sex tutors, having a threesome in the balcony with the star of a dance troupe, and Ujaran. Kali was clearly making the best of her infrequent time out of confinement. Cyan seemed to be enjoying the talk about her Tejmare's sexcapades. She even seemed a little calmer about the prospect of having to wait another 35 days to free Kali. Who's that? Samari asked, startling everyone as she pointed to a pink-haired girl standing next to a strangely dyed Kali. Ujaran and Lady Darkseid know her as Strawberry, Azuri said. She's a non-citizen resident. That's all I really know, so far. Is she Lampharian? Sam asked. No, Herisham, Azuri asked why. Ask Tyrell about her when you get home, Cyan thought while touching Samari's shoulder. He knows more. Nothing important, just wondering, Sam said with a shrug. She just looks cute and wholesome. Azuri snorted audibly. Cyan covered her mouth and laughed. Kali fucked her too, didn't she? Samari smirked. Don't worry, Azuri laughed. My Ujaran joined in. He's had a lot of new experiences lately. Lady Darkseid is a terrible influence. Terribly good or bad. I'll decide once Ujaran's back in my bed. I think I'm missing something, Sam said. Why all the sudden threesomes? Pharisine men are twice the fun, Azuri giggled. They have 2. Oh, Samari blushed brightly. I look forward to her telling me all about it, Cyan smiled. Sam realized she'd never told her about what happened with Syntholo. It didn't seem right to let Kali be the only one with interesting stories. At this rate, we may have to see if there's a way to get you knocked up and out of the unperfected program, Sam muttered without realizing she'd spoken aloud. I'm sure you'll enjoy your trip back with Oleander, Cyanide said while squeezing her hand tightly. I'm sure he's looking forward to spending time with you, Samari. The emphasis she'd put on her current name spoke volumes. A remnant of the old conflict between Kivaza and Kayla had slipped out. She had her own independent existence now, and so did Kivaza.